Good evening, members, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this final audit of this term, I think. Certainly before the election. With no ado, let's go first of all for apologies. Do we have any apologies?
I had apologies from Councillor Dixon, but all the members of the committee are here, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members' interests? Looking around, should you think of anything during the proceedings, please call a halt and we'll record whatever you think turns up. There are some minutes which have been distributed for the meeting held on the 3rd of February. Can I take those as a true record? I assume no matters arising then from those? No, good. Okay, fine, thank you. The item 4 is the terms of reference for the Audit Committee. Ordinary Council meeting on the 23rd of March. The Council approved the following amendment to the Committee's terms of reference. Shall I read that? Yeah. To examine and consider the financial outturn results and approve the Council's audited statement of accounts.
Chairman, the item is just for the committee for noting, so the committee notes the formal change to its terms of reference.
Okay, thank you for that, Anne. So noted, members. Thanks. Item 5. This is the update of the financial results and statements of accounts for 2021, and the report is attached. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. There's two parts to this agenda item. First, I'll cover off the Council's financial position for 2021, and then Debbie from EY will give an update on the progress of the external audit of the statement of accounts for the same year. So members will be aware the Council operates three main funds. The General Fund, which covers the delivery of all the Council services other than those covered by the Housing Revenue Account. We've got the Housing Revenue Account, which covers the management of the Council's housing stock. And then we've got the capital programme. That covers the large projects that we've got, which are creating or significantly enhancing an asset. So we've got a report in front of you. If we go straight to Annex A of that report, it's split into a few sections. We've got the overview and then sections 1 to 5. I only intend to cover the overview in sections 1 and 2, not go into all of the detail of sections 3 to 5. Sections 3 to 5 are just given much more detail on some and breakdown of what some of the figures I'll be covering. So if I can take, looking at the overview first, so section A overview, sorry, Annex A overview. I'm pleased to report that in paragraph 2.2, it shows that we had an underspend on the General Fund for 2020-2021 of £148,000, which is just 0.12%. This takes into account all the carry forwards and reserve transfers, which are going to be covered in section 2, so I'll come to that shortly. Paragraph 3.2 reports that for the Housing Revenue Account, there was an underspend of £246,000, which was 1.74%. Again, this is after the carry forwards and reserve transfers have been allowed for. Finally, for the overview, paragraph 4.2 reports on the capital programme, where we ended the year with an underspend of £305,000 on the General Fund capital items and an underspend of £391,000 on the Housing Revenue Account capital items, which were 13.1% and 16.9% respectively. So generally, it looks like we're in a good shape there, underspends across the board. So if we could move into some more detail, we've got Annex A Section 1 on the next page. This sets out in more detail the figures behind some of those underspends that I've just reported, including what the underspend was prior to any carry forwards or reserve transfers. On this page, really, I just want to focus on that first table and just pick up one of the large numbers on there. So the very first number in that table, it shows that we had an underspend before adjustments of 4.675 million. Now you'll probably be wondering, how on earth have you come up with an underspend of, getting on towards £5 million? The vast majority of this figure relates to the accounting treatment required for some of the grant funding the council received in respect of the business reliefs that government awarded as part of its response to COVID. It's a little bit technical, so I won't go into too much detail on it, but essentially what happens was we received the grant funding. It was about 3.8 million. We had to put it into our general fund, but we're not allowed to then put it into the collection fund, which is where the impact of those reliefs were felt. At the end of the year, the collection fund reports a large deficit, which gets carried forward. And on our general fund, as we can see on the table, we've got the large underspend. Both of those get carried into 21-22, and that's where they become offset. So from our side, the accounting entries are that we have to report the underspend. We then scribble that away in a reserve, so that's then ready to offset that deficit. A little bit technical, but because it is such a large number, I do just need to go into that. In terms of the other variances against any of those other funds, those are the detail on that, so quite a lot of detail is within sections 3 to 5, which, as I say, I don't intend to go through here at this meeting. We could be quite a while going through that, and members have had the report. But I will obviously take questions on any particular bits of it at the end. Moving on to Annex A, Section 2, this details the carry forwards and budget transfers to earmarked reserves that have been allowed for in some of those previous numbers. It's important to remember that we only allow carry forwards for specific reasons, such as projects that are in progress and have slipped a little bit, and we do not allow carry forwards just if there's a general underspend because something came in a little bit cheaper than expected. Where we got to is with the general fund, there was carry forwards of 346,000. Of that figure, 312,000, which is 90%, relates to unspent grant funding. A lot of that grant funding came in quite late in the year and related to some of the COVID-19 schemes that we're putting in place. Within the housing revenue account, there were no carry forwards required. And then turning to capital, on the general fund side, there were carry forwards of 754,000. The majority of that relates to the new pavilion, the new build down at Thorney Bay, of which is grant funded. And then looking at HRA capital programme, Housing Revenue Account capital programme, there were carry forwards of 402,000. About half of that relates to the general various replacement and repair schemes that go on throughout the year. 100,000 of that relates to the housing management system, and then the remainder relates to the various new developments that were in progress, and it's just where timing differences arose during the year. I appreciate that's quite a quick, brief summary of that report, but that does conclude everything that I did want to talk about today. I suggest that I take any questions from members before handing over to Debbie for her part, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, members? Councillor Blackwell?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just one or two queries really. On the HRA budget, I remember not many years ago when it used to be frowned on if you had an underspend, and it was frowned on so much they wouldn't allow it to cover into the next year's budget. Do they give a reason why that is such an underspend? The other question is on the general fund and the waterside squash courts, 175,000. It wasn't that long ago we closed all our squash courts at Waterside because it wasn't that popular. We never spent 175,000 on new squash courts. Who signs that off? That's two questions, Chairman.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. In terms of the first one, the housing revenue account, the detail of that variance is in section 4, Annex A section 4, and it's a combination of various bits and pieces. A little bit where rental income was higher than expected. There were some underspends, some overspends as well. The bulk of it related to some of the recharges from between general fund and housing revenue account. It's important to note that any underspend on housing revenue account is retained within the housing revenue account, and it can be used to offset any items that are required in the future years. It just all forms part of the 30-year business plan for housing revenue account. In terms of the general fund, and in picking out the squash court conversion, this was in relation to the closure of those squash courts and converting them into new gym space. You've got to remember this report is reporting on accounts from April 2020 through to March 2021, so it's a while ago now. But that's the project cost of that transformation into the gym space.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thanks for the answer. Any further questions, members? No, thank you. We'll move on.
Over to Ms. Debbie Hanson, external auditor.
Debbie, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, I've got a slight cough and cold, so I may leave after our item if that's okay, just so I don't subject you to my presence for any longer. This is our ISA 260 report, which is the report we're required to present to you before we conclude our audit and the financial statements and our value for money assessment. We bring it to your attention so that you can be aware of the key issues identified during the audit and also raise any additional concerns that you may have. I won't take you through the whole report because I will take it as read. What I'd like to do is just take you through the executive summary and also provide you with an update on progress since we drafted this report last week. So in terms of the executive summary on page 5, we provide you with an update on any changes to the scope of our audit since we presented the plan to this audit committee. The main changes are outlined there and I'll just talk you through those. We always update our materiality on receipt of the draft financial statements further to our planning processes. We've done that, and as you can see from the table there, there's been very small differences and changes in our materiality and performance materiality. We have, however, identified an additional risk that was not in our draft audit plan. That's not a significant risk, but it's an area of focus that we've identified, and that relates to the recognition of grant income associated with the COVID-19. And as has just been noted, the council, along with many other councils, received significant sums related to COVID. For some of those, the council is acting as a principal, and therefore the funds are for the council to use and distribute. In other cases, the council is acting as an agent and is just passporting those funds on in effect on behalf of central government. The accounting for those different types of grant is therefore different depending on whether there's an agent or a principal arrangement. Where the council's a principal, there's also a question to consider in terms of any conditions related to those grants. So, for example, do they have to be spent by a certain date? If there are those conditions, has the council complied with those? And again, have they correctly accounted for those? So, for example, if grant had to be spent by a certain date and has not been, there's therefore a potential liability to repay that to central government, so a creditor should be shown in the council's accounts. We've also highlighted auditing accounting estimates. There's a new auditing standard or an update to auditing standard ISA 540 in relation to estimates, which requires auditors to undertake more work in relation to those particular areas. We flagged that because that's particularly impacted on the work we've done on property, plant and equipment and also pensions. So we've undertaken additional work in both of those areas as a response to the update to ISA 540. We've also noted that, again, we've very much conducted this year's audit remotely as a result of the ongoing impact of COVID, and therefore we've undertaken additional procedures to validate the information provided by the council, referred to as IPE, and that includes things like screen sharing, etc., to make sure that the information we're being given is complete and accurate. So those are really the changes to the scope. So if we move on to the next page, just to update you on the status of the audit. As we all note there, we have substantially completed the audit. However, there has been an issue that's come to our attention quite recently, which we need to give further consideration to, and that may impact on the scope of the work we undertake and the risk assessment of the audit. At this stage, I can't really say any more about that because it's come to our attention fairly recently, but we will report back to the audit committee once our assessment of that issue has been concluded. We expect to issue the audit certificate we've noted here after we issue the audit opinion, and that's because we're still waiting for the group instructions issued by the National Audit Office, which govern the work we undertake on their behalf. We expect the council to be under the threshold that requires any work to be undertaken, as in previous years. However, until those instructions are issued, we can't confirm that, and therefore we cannot issue our certificates. So that's an issue that's impacting on every single local authority across the country, so no certificates can be issued until those instructions are issued, which we expect to be in July. So that is going to hold up the certificate. We note here that at the date of the report we haven't identified any audit differences from our audit work, be that corrected or uncorrected. There's some very minor disclosure differences that we've identified. So I think, again, as in previous years, the quality of the Council's accounts and supporting working papers has been very good. So we'd like to thank the finance team for their support in terms of the audit. We also note in terms of our value for money conclusion that we have largely completed that, but again the issue that's been identified recently does need to be considered in both the context of our opinion work and our value for money conclusion work, so we will need to report back to you subsequently on that. Those are the main issues I wanted to note there. What I'd like to then do is just take you through the key risks on page 8 of the report and provide you with an update on where we are on those, because within the report you'll note that a number of those were still in progress or subject to review. So our first risk is misstatements due to fraud and error. Our main response to that is to test journals that are prepared. We have completed that work. I have completed my review of that work. I've identified an area where I'd like the team just to go back and seek some further clarification on a couple of areas, but that is substantially completed, and I haven't identified any issues from the work we've completed to date that would give a concern. The incorrect capitalisation of revenue expenditure is our fraud risk that we identify on most of our local government audits. We again have substantially completed that. We are just waiting for, we were waiting for, a few bits of information back from the council. We received those a few days ago, so the audit team are in the process of looking at that final information, and then that will go through the review process. We also identified the valuation of investment properties as a significant risk. That was related to, again, the impact of COVID-19 on investment property valuations. We have completed that work and we have not identified any issues in relation to those valuations. The other areas of focus that we identified that were not significant risk but are still areas that we do additional work on. Firstly, we had the valuation of other land and buildings. That work again is substantially complete. We are just waiting again for some final bits of information back from the council to fully conclude that, but we haven't identified any issues from the work completed to date. We've completed our work on the pension liability valuation and again identified no issues. That is just subject to my final review, which will be done within the next few days. The NNDR appeals provision and bad debt provision work has been completed. I've reviewed the NNDR provision, which was a key risk area within that, and satisfied that that provision is materially accurate and no issues have been identified. The going concern disclosures work we leave to the very end of the audit because that needs to cover a period of at least 12 months from the date of our audit report. As we're not 100% sure at the moment when the date of that audit report will be, we've kind of held off doing that work because we need a cash flow projection that goes at least 12 months from that date. We have worked with the council last year in relation to the going concern disclosure, so we're comfortable that the council understands what needs to go in there in terms of projected reserves and cash position. And again, we've looked in previous years at the cash flow projections the council has produced and had no issues with those, so I don't expect any issues with the completion of that work. And then finally, the additional risk identified in relation to COVID grant income. That work has been completed. I've finished my review of that and we're satisfied there's no issues in relation to that area. So that was really the only areas I wanted to draw to the committee's attention. So I think we have made good progress, but we are not yet in a position to sign, and I think we need to report back to either this committee or the newly formed version of this committee, as we're aware of the local elections. But I think it's appropriate that when we conclude, we do bring a further report back that concludes on all the outstanding areas.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Thanks very much. Very concise report. Thank you. Any questions, members? Councillor Thornton.
In terms of this newfound issue, do you think that will fall into a non-significant or significant issue?
I think it's too early for us to say at this point, to be honest. As I said, we need to assess it and consider the potential impact on both the opinion and the value for money conclusion, but we will clearly report back to the committee once we've done that.
I think we're okay on that. Is there no note to the report? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, both, and we note the report.
Chairman, sorry, if there's a recommendation.
Sorry, recommendation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Following the scrutiny, the financial results for 2020/2021 and an explanation of budget vacancies, significant items are so noted. Is that agreed, members? Right. Thank you. Moving on to the monitoring report, the Council's governance arrangements. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the monitoring report of the Council's governance arrangements. Just as a reminder, this is the second such report for the 2021-22 financial year, and the next report will be the annual governance statement, which is the more detailed look into all of our governance arrangements across that entire financial year, and that will be planned to come to the committee in July. Just to flag, this is under the background section, that the committee will be aware that the council's governance arrangements include individual staff leads across the council who have got responsibility for the governance processes that are set out in the report below, and they're members of what we call the governance group. And just to say that the report was developed in consultation with officers from that group. I'll do what I did last time and just really sort of flag some areas that I think are worth bringing to your attention, but obviously I'll take any questions at the end of the report, happy to do that. So the first area that I'd like to just flag for your attention is just around section 3.2, and this is around business planning and strategy, including partnerships. Just a couple of things here. So the first of those was just around the new corporate plan for 2021-24. And just to say that we had an action on there to reinstate some monitoring arrangements of what we call the corporate action plan over the course of the year. That has happened, albeit it's been on an ad hoc basis over the year. There is going to be an in-depth review of the delivery against the sort of key activities that we said for 2021-22 in the corporate plan, and that's scheduled for discussion at corporate management team in May of this year. So just to flag that. Underneath the same section, this is in 3.2.4, so this is relating to the partnership side of things. Again, it's really just to sort of flag a couple of partnerships, and this is off the back of an audit that was undertaken of partnerships, which suggested that we need to do more in terms of reporting on and checking on the performance of those partnerships. And just to flag a couple of partnerships that have been reported into members. The first of those was relating to ASELA, the Association of South Essex Local Authorities, which came to Cabinet in September 21, and then also to the Wellbeing Policy and Scrutiny Committee in November 2021, where they reviewed the new strategy that was being developed by the Castlepoint and Rochford Joint Health and Wellbeing Board. That's a couple of examples. I think that there is more that we can do across our key partnerships that we have in place, and therefore the next paragraph just suggests, and I think this will probably become some sort of action within the annual governance statement coming in July, that we use the policy and scrutiny committees more to investigate and receive reports on the performance of some of our key partnerships. So that's just really an update in that area. The next area that I'd just like to flag is in paragraph 3.4. So this is to do with asset management. So that's page 3 of this report. Just to say, with regards to asset management, there are adequate routine assurance processes in place, so there are no problems there. We have asset management sessions at our operational management team, and any significant asset management issues referred to what's called our strategic asset group. The next couple of paragraphs just flag some improvements with regards to some of the assets. So I won't read them all out, but you can see some structural repairs to Woodside Cemetery, for example, repairs on Long Road, etc., etc. And then the next paragraph there just refers to some lease renewals which have been completed recently. So just sort of flagging those for your attention and interest, really. I won't dwell on risk management at this stage because the next item on the agenda is indeed the corporate risk register, so we'll talk about that then. Scrolling through to 3.6, it's on page 4, this is to do with health and safety. Again, it's just really to flag the at the bottom here, the internal audit report dated March 2022, and just a few areas that will be developed over the the now current financial year, so the 22-23 financial year, and this is to do with departmental specific health and safety policies, simplification of our incident reporting system, and then implementation of documented process to ensure lessons learned have been implemented. So I just wanted to flag those just to sort of give you a flavour of how all of this sort of works, and it's obviously, you know, where there is an internal audit carried out that has an impact on some of our key governance processes. We make sure that we include them in these sorts of reports and also in the annual governance statement. Scrolling down further, the next area I think was around underneath procurement. So this is 3.11. This is on page 6. Well, it's actually page 7 is the bit I'm going to be talking about. It's just again to flag the procurement green paper. So that was published in December 2020, and the government responded to the consultation. Government's response to the consultation was in December 2022. Just to sort of give you a bit of a flavour of that. So there were some overarching goals within that green paper, which was to do with simplifying procurement processes, placing value of money at their heart, which I think we do already. Very, very interested the government are in generating social value through procurement. So in other words, using council procurement to create new jobs, develop skills perhaps in the local area, addressing inequality, health and wellbeing, community engagement, some of those sort of wider aspects to procurement there, and also unleashing opportunities for small businesses, charities and social enterprises. So there's quite a bit of change coming in the procurement world, and we'll obviously wait for when that becomes the procurement bill, which is expected to become law in 2023, and then we'll have probably a 6-month implementation process following that. But again, just to flag that as a development within the world of procurement. 3.12, so project management was one of our areas for development over the course of the year, and just to say that that I held some training with about 20 to 25 members of staff, it was across the council, over 3 days in March of this year, providing training on our new toolkit and workbook, and that went mainly to the operational management team, but also to some others across the council who manage projects. And just to say that the focus now on project management is going to be establishing our project board. I think it's going to be a single project board who will obviously have a key role to play in the overarching view and understanding of how projects are being implemented. And then 2 more things. So 3.13, which is around complaints. I think when I brought this paper last time, I think there was a request from councillors just to give a little bit more detail on the local government ombudsman complaints that have been received. So that paragraph there, and I won't just read through it, but just gives you a little bit more detail in terms of the number of complaints that were received, how many complaints were upheld, etc., etc. But we're talking very small numbers here, and I think it's important just to bring that in and flag that. But you know, there are small numbers, and actually in most cases the council was found not to be at fault. So just wanted to flag that because that was very much an improvement to the report that was suggested last time around. And then finally on this, underneath ethical governance, is just to flag that in March 2022, internal audit agreed with senior management in terms of reference for an audit of ethical governance, which is planned for the first quarter of 22-23.
Thank you.
Hello. That's all I wanted to say. So yeah, thank you. Any questions?
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Blackwell.
Chairman, just a quickie on procurement. I don't know if Ben can, and it's a little bit sort of give me a little bit of licence. I often get from a lot of local businesses that they can't get on the council's list to bid for works. Now, there's a set list, and the biggest problem is what I can hear from people that you can't get on a list unless you've already worked for a local government or a local authority. So if you've never worked for a local authority, you can't get on the council's list, which don't quite seem right. Is this set in stone that they have to go through this procedure? They have to have worked for another local authority before they can get on our list?
So, I mean, around procurement, we've got a whole sort of raft of processes and procedures. I think this sort of concept of there being a list of the council's preferred suppliers is not entirely true, actually. So whenever we go out to a procurement exercise, we'll either draw down off a framework, which is already something that's been through all the legal processes and therefore has been let as a framework agreement, and we can draw down off that, or we'll go out to a typical sort of tender and therefore we'll say what it is we want to do, and anybody is open to be able to bid to that. So they're all advertised through the website. So I mean, I think the concern that you're sort of raising, I think, is something that the procurement green paper is looking to address, in the sense that I think what government has seen is that obviously as a big spend, you know, as a relatively big spender in the area, we do have an opportunity to put a lot of that spend into local businesses and make a difference to local businesses, and therefore that's why it makes that reference to small businesses, community groups, etc., in that. So we haven't got a list of our suppliers and we always go onto there. It's always an open, competitive tender process.
Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Thorns?
Thank you, Chair. I have about 3 or 4 questions,
No.
with your permission.
Please go ahead.
I would request, if it's all right, that these could be minuted as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Section 341, you mention in there the strategic asset group. Who do they report to, and what level of member input or oversight is in place with that group?
Question. I don't sit on the strategic asset group. I don't know if any other officers here do sit on that group.
Could someone come back to me on that?
I can come back to you.
We'll find an answer for you.
Yeah, okay, come back
Very
to you.
much.
Yeah.
Section 342, where are the details of the progress on these repairs, assessment, procurement, costing, completion, and can they be found for member scrutiny at all?
I'll come back to you on that one again. Noted.
Thank you. Section 343, once negotiated, how are these leases signed off? Who has that responsibility? What member input is there during the process? Lease details should be recorded in the public domain. Where are these available for public viewing?
Right, if I may, Chair, I think Ms Orban may have a response
Chairman,
to
that would be a matter that would be dealt with through the Council's legal section. They would deal with the necessary formal agreement to deal with the renewal of leases.
Section 3.4, the Corporate Asset Management Plan on the Council's website lists its next review is being held in March 2020, whereas the progress mentioned in 3.4.4 listed for public scrutiny.
I can't answer that, I'm afraid, tonight, but I will again note that and come back to you on that point. Thank you.
Only 2 more questions, if I may. Section 3.4.5, can you please explain this further and direct me to this section and the new optional or mandatory capture of assets, please?
Yeah, certainly. So this actually relates to the service plan template that the council uses that we have in place for when services are writing their service plans. So we had a section in there which in 2020-21 was an optional section in terms of council areas being able to capture the assets that they currently had in place and approximate value of those assets, and then set out to deliver their service plans for that for the coming financial year, what assets they think they might need, including any new assets, for example. That same section, nothing has changed in terms of what's being asked, but that became mandatory for 2021-22 onwards, and that was very much so that we could capture in a central place, so that others across the council, for example, if there were assets that might need to be procured, then those involved in the procurement would have an early sight of what potentially those assets might be. So it's very much as part of our service planning process to be able to capture across the organisation some of those assets. Now, of course, in some areas, you know, in my area, for example, strategy, policy and performance, the asset is nothing more than a laptop computer. It's really sort of nothing more than that. Other areas, for example, the housing stock, for example, would be far more significant. Any leisure centres, any service areas that have got maybe any sort of plant and machinery, that would be captured within that section.
If I may. There's one final thing. At the November audit meeting, it was brought to the officer's attention that we were not compliant with our statutory obligations under the Communities and Local Government published Code of Practice on Data Transparency, where the council was required to make details about its land and building assets publicly available. Officers agreed to look into this and report back on this at the next quarterly meeting. I'm aware that the asset map does now have a number of new entries. However, these do not appear to be comprehensive and possibly not even accurate. Can you please update members on where we are with this matter? Is this a new asset capture mentioned in the 345 section? and what further progress has been made on producing a supplementary listing of all the land assets and their status to bring us in line with the neighbouring boroughs.
My apologies, I don't recall actually for me at the last meeting that being set as an action. I apologise that there's not been any progress on that if that was indeed agreed as an action at the last audit committee. I'm sorry that I might have missed that.
This is the reason I wanted it minuted, because it was one I raised and I was told you'd come back on me.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, okay. Oh, I mean, obviously that will need to come back to the next meeting, won't it? Yeah, okay. Is that okay, Councillor?
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Any further questions? Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Brockman.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question about our suppliers, really. If we got a list of our approved suppliers that we use, and is there an amount, say like over £10,000 or whatever it is there an amount that we have to use an approved supplier for? Where is that list available? Thank you.
So we don't hold a list of approved suppliers that we would always necessarily go to in the first instance. There are some these framework agreements, as they're called. We work very closely with Braintree Council through their procurement hub. They will often let general framework agreements for certain services, and they'll go through all the tendering process for those. We're then able to draw down off those. So there will be suppliers on those framework agreements that we can then draw off without having to sort of run our own sort of competitions from scratch ourselves. In terms of the different sort of levels of where you have to do different things, there are various sort of set levels, and I should know absolutely off the top of my head, but I don't. I'm looking across at Lance actually in case he does. But you mentioned £10,000. I think that is one of the thresholds. But depending on the value of the procurement, one might be you just maybe go out, for some sort of soft tender, just get 3 prices for something. Once you get over a certain threshold, it then becomes a more complicated process. And then once you get to the really big numbers, you're then having to sort of run through something which really you would need sort of legal support on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ben, for this report. It's welcome because it's showing that we are trying to do the right things in the right way in terms of being inclusive and open on our governance. I just have a couple of observations, really, and which I've converted into questions. I noticed from the report that the level of measurement against governance items are deemed as satisfactory. What is, in your opinion, do the council have to do to raise the level from satisfactory to good?
So the use of that language satisfactory, it transfers across to the use of the language in the annual governance statement, and we have a table of all of our key processes about basically where we think there is satisfactory compliance, I think good compliance, partial compliance and no compliance. And when we as the governance group, I'm looking across, we've got a couple of people here on the governance group, when we look at all of these processes, we basically go through and draw from lots of different information, and then we come to an agreement in terms of where we sort of think. So I mean, it is, it's loosely based around sort of percentages of where I think, it's between sort of 50 and 75%. We reckon that's kind of like, I think we say sort of satisfactory at that stage, less than sort of 50% partial, anything more than 75% sort of, full compliance. So it's got a measure to it, but I mean, some of it's very much based around sort of experience of pulling on a whole range of sources. We have manager assurance statements. We obviously have the internal audit work that's done. It's why we have all of the process owners effectively on the good governance group, because then they'll be able to give their view on things. So I could talk, for example, about the service planning side of things, because that's very much my sort of area of the business. But then we'll have other officers talking about perhaps the the HR side of things or the ethical governance side of things. So that's why we use that. That's why we use that language. It's tied in with the assessments that we come to on the annual governance statement.
Thanks for that. Just one more thing on project management, and Councillor Thornton is far more qualified to speak and ask questions regarding this. But it's come to mind, you mentioned the new the new toolkit. I presume this is a new tracking methodology we're using rather than the methodology of the project itself, so agile and etc.
Yeah, that's right. I mean the toolkit itself covers the whole sort of project life cycle, so it covers basically from the sort of scoping side of things through to the project setup, through to further planning, and then through to the delivery and the monitoring side of things as well, and then obviously any sort of like post project closure processes we might do. So yes, so it is across the whole side of things. That's why I was mentioning about the project board, because we're entering into some new categories of projects where, depending on various criteria, you'll end up with either a gold, a silver or a bronze project, and proposing that any gold and silver projects would be, the progress of those would be managed at the project board level, with the bronze ones maybe appearing more at kind of like your sort of DMT, so it'd still have an executive management team member involved in the monitoring of those, but probably wouldn't be quite as scrutinised as you would with those silver and the gold projects. So yeah, it does very much cover the monitoring and the delivery side of things as well. Thank you.
Councillor Thornton wants to come back?
Thank you. Just on that, is there any sites seen for scrutiny on everything from the PID to the lessons learned report, the LLR? Would we be able to view what the PIDs are and what the LLRs are on the projects through the PMO? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I mean, I think that where you'll have your very sort of high value projects, I would expect those to be ones where you would be bringing business cases into cabinet, for example, and therefore those business cases will have all of that documentation, included as appendices. I don't think it's a question that every single project that we're working on will be sort of brought to members' attention, but certainly those sort of very high level ones would be.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, members. Very interesting questions and a good commitment. Thank you, to take these and bring these answers back the next time. I think we are making progress, and I think the fact that you're showing the questions that are being raised are being, endeavour to be answered, even though we're moving in, across into a new audit committee, whenever that may be. So thank you, Ben, and others behind your team for that team. Members, can we note this progress of this report? Great, thank you. Okay. Next item is the Corporate Risk Register Update Report. Ben again.
That's me again, Chairman. Yeah, hence the big swig of water. Right. So the covering report on this is very short. It's to update the Audit Committee on the risk management matters, specifically the Corporate Risk Register. So we bring the Corporate Risk Register into Audit Committee on a 6-monthly cycle. You obviously have the Corporate Risk Registers included as an appendix to this report. I'll just bring to your attention a few of the risks on there that I think might be of interest, but again, happy to take any questions. I think just to pause on what we call our risk heat map, I think I always like to draw attention to this. This is sort of a summary of all the risks that we have on the register and where those risks sit on our risk grid, where we're looking at likelihood and impact. It's just really to flag again that this isn't one of these things where actually red is necessarily a bad thing. It's red because it's a serious risk, either in terms of its impact or in terms of its likelihood. But it's not always a case that you would look or be able to move all of those red risks into amber or even sort of green risk categories, just because some of those risks are sort of such sort of high impact potentially that you wouldn't be able to do that. So that's just really just a sort of a summary of all of our risks, which you can cross-reference with the risks below. Just a few that I wanted to draw to your attention. So the first one of those is risk 2.3. So that is on page, within the pack, sorry, it's 28 and 93. I don't know if we have the sort of page numbers on the printed, but it's in order. So if you go through to risk 2.3, members have that one in front of you. So this is a risk to do with financial hardship. I won't read out the entire risk, but again, it's important obviously to include this one, particularly where we are at the moment with everything going on, stretches, the impact on sort of family budgets, etc. And it's just to sort of flag a couple of things that have been done recently. So this is under actions to further mitigate the risk. So action 1 is around an updated advice and support page on our website with details of what the council can do to help with signposting and working with other organisations. I think just to sort of flag that for interest, it's one of these things that obviously it's very difficult for us to do a huge amount because it is all about the amount of money going into people's pockets, but we do have good links with partners who are very skilled at working with people to help them to sort of maybe maximise benefit takes or maybe make some other changes that can help with their household budgets. And the second action really to flag was just around the £150 energy bills, a rebate to eligible households. Again, just to flag that and say that the teams here are working on that, and I believe that from the end of April, that's when we're going to be getting out those payments to people really. But it felt like a good risk to flag because it's very, very relevant and current at the moment. So that's risk 2.3. The next risk, 3.1, the risk as it's currently worded is around a local plan which is not sound. It's in here in its current form at the moment, but just to say that obviously we'll need to be looking at that risk and rewording that risk, I think, to reflect the next stages of where we go with the corporate plan. So it's what I'm saying is it's kind of lost its relevance, obviously, since since there have been further discussions and decisions made about the local plan, but it is on there and will need to be looked at again. The next risk on here is the housing management system. So we have a risk here around the housing management system. We've had a range of challenges around this particular system. So currently considering and working through some of the next steps, and I believe there's going to be a report coming to Cabinet, I think, once all of the options around that particular system and all the implications around that system have been considered. So again, just to flag that one for now, which is why that is on our risk register. And then I think the last one I just wanted to raise to your attention was risk 5.1. which is a risk about being unable to deliver a balanced budget and achieve financial self-sufficiency. So this one has always been scored slightly lower than this, but we felt obviously it's appropriate with all the work that's been going on with the finance team at the moment and briefings to members of staff and also offers of briefings to members as well, which have taken place, just to really flag that that there is a lot of work that the council will need to be doing to close budget gaps in future years, and we're currently working up a transformation programme which is looking at what we can possibly do at the council to either generate more income or to reduce our costs. So there is a list that is currently being worked on. We'll be looking to refine that list over the next month or so and pull that into a programme of delivery. But that is one where the risk score has changed because our sort of financial situations have changed, and it would be wrong not to flag that tonight. So that was all I wanted to raise on the risk register. But happy to take any questions on either those or any others that you'd like some more information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. Question with respect to 3.2, the risk in terms of the emerging the implementation of the new housing management system. Is it true that we have lost around £800,000 on a system that wasn't delivered, that members were not made aware of?
So at the moment, I think that is all being worked through, and I don't think it would be fair for me to tout around numbers at this particular committee. I think until all the details of that have been worked through. I mean, I don't know enough of the details to be able to confidently do that, but I don't think it'd be right to talk about that here and now. I think we'd need to actually wait until all the implications of that particular system and that project have been worked through.
So would it be fair to say then that money has been written off as a result of a system?
I don't believe that there's been a decision. I mean, Lance, if you'd like to make them.
Lance, thank you.
Yeah, as it stands at the moment, there's no formal decision being taken. There is going to be a report, I believe, to the next available Cabinet meeting, which will set out what any implications, including the financial costs.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thornton?
First of all, on a point of order, do we not get to ask the questions before it goes out to general, or is that just me having it wrong? As a member of the council, do we not ask the questions first?
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
One on implementation of the ICT contract at the beginning was completed in February 22. That was to assess the adequacy of the arrangements. That looks like there was no issue with that whatsoever. However, on Appendix B, you mentioned feedback to address some immediate concerns. So I'm assuming that the incumbent that was leaving at the time had not fulfilled their potential contract issues. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but obviously some items on the RAG list must have been read. For you to have those concerns, could you just give me some more indication about what the concerns or what the outgoing incumbent was not doing correctly, or what happened at that point in transition, please? Does that make sense?
Sorry, apologies, Council. We're still referring to the risk 2.3, are we here?
I may have confused two things together. If I have, I apologise. But Appendix B says that there was feedback to address immediate concerns regarding the handover that was discussed with officers, and this covered, and you have 5 bulleted points there on that.
Sorry, you're on the wrong.
So I think you've jumped to my item, Councillor.
Then I am confused, and I take it back. I apologise. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Ben? Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just an update really regarding the financial £150 rebate energy payments. 24,000 of these payments are currently being made. The process started on Monday, and the payments team are expecting to complete within 8 working days, so that's good positive news based on that comment earlier. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for making that point, Councillor. Do you want to comment, Ben? No. Okay. If no further questions, members, we will note that report and look forward to hearing back from you. Thank you. Item 8 is the internal audit quarterly performance report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So members may recall that at the July meeting last year, the committee approved our internal audit plan of work, and that work will contribute to the assurances the committee receive about the effectiveness of the arrangements for governance, risk management and internal control as they've operated during the year, to help inform the committee about the annual governance statement that will be drafted in respect of the year, as was reflected in the earlier item on the governance arrangements that Ben took you through. So this report is our regular report to the committee outlining the progress that we've made in delivering that plan. Appendix A provides a status update on each of the pieces of work within the plan. We do keep the plan under review in accordance with any resource demands the Council makes of the audit team to address the challenges posed for the Council as the year develops. There has been one further change to the plan to reflect the circumstances faced by the Council as reported in section 2 of the report. The results of the audit work that's been completed since we last met is set out at Appendix B and C, and I'm expecting to get a question about one of those in a moment. As we set out in section 3, our previously disappointing level of sickness absence has improved. With the changes to the team, there's now been a much reduced level of sickness absence. We did actually incur 11 days per full-time equivalent in the previous year. In the 21-22 year, that's now come down to 0.4 days, so that's a pleasing improvement in the fitness of the team. The impact of the pandemic on both the team and the council services has impacted on the pace of progression for some of our work, but we do continue to work closely with services to progress the work, and we are getting currently appropriate engagement from the services to assist us. So I'm pleased to say that work is progressing and being completed, and at this point, although we'd probably be happier if we were further ahead, nearly 2/3 of the planned audit work is completed, with just reports to be agreed in some instances. The rest of the work is in progress and due to be delivered before the next meeting, when all the annual stuff gets pulled together for the annual reporting for 21-22. As I've previously reported to the committee, our efforts to engage an experienced senior auditor have been unsuccessful, but we have now been successful in engaging an auditor to complete the grant work that we need to undertake, and that work is currently in train. As I said before, the results of the completed audit work since we last met are shown in Appendices B and C, and these reflect the challenge and support that the team provided as part of implementing the new ICT contract last year. With this note just being brought to the committee to confirm the feedback that was provided at the time of the implementation happening, and the results of our work on health and safety, over which we're able to provide satisfactory assurance to the committee. That's what I really wanted to say, Chair, but happy to take any questions that members may have.
Councillor Thornton?
In the comments in Appendix B, you mentioned in the themes there, feedback to address immediate concerns regarding the handover was discussed with officers, and then you've mentioned 5 items there. Could you expand on that for me, please?
So obviously the council took a decision to move from a particular ICT provider to a different ICT provider, and in our view the ICT is a really fundamental part of what underpins the infrastructure of the council operating effectively. So we're very keen to be kind of cited and involved in the adequacy of the arrangements to ensure that handover went as smoothly as possible, because it was a big deal for the council. So we were working sort of alongside the ICT manager and the team that were going through that process to move from one supplier to the other, and challenging and asking them questions about the arrangements they had in place. And that led to these particular items where we thought there were still some additional things they could do to strengthen the arrangements to mitigate the risk of things going wrong. So that's what's listed there. I mean, if you've got any particular questions about particular bullet points, I can try to elicit more about those.
I think my concern was that in terms of looking at it from a KPI, RAG is quite high level, doesn't really give you much in terms of that. When somebody mentions in the risk register and the RAG ratings that that's where the issue was, that tends to be quite a global, not a specific element in terms of the issues. So this was more of an intuitive reaction rather than me knowing specifically what to ask, because as I look at this, I don't have much hair on the front, but the hairs at the back seem to be flickering up a bit. I was just wondering, what were those concerns? What were the things that obviously were becoming immediate concerns to you for you to mention it? I felt like it needed to be asked the question as to what those immediate concerns actually were.
Okay, so there was an implementation plan that the officers did have, and they knew through working through that plan there were things that hadn't yet been done as we were approaching go live date, and so they needed to be done to enable an effective go live. But when we engaged with them, they weren't prioritised particularly within that list of stuff that needed to be done. So that's what that point there is making. Sort of there's a whole range of things you need to do, but obviously some things are more important than others. So we think you should be aware of that in your own mind, so that you know which are the most important things to be tackling first, and that you really do need to get done. Some things are probably just nice to haves, so they can come sort of further down the RAG list. So it was about prioritising the actions, because it was a very time-limited period. There was a definitive cut-off point at the end of the year, beyond which this could not go, because the incumbent supplier wasn't going to be there and the new supplier was. So that all needed to work effectively in that time-constrained period of time.
So can you assure me that they were procedural procurement issues in terms of having everything in place for the new incumbent to take over, rather than embedded issues within the old system that you were trying to remove within a replacement of the incumbent?
Yeah, they were the handover arrangements. They weren't the underlying infrastructure arrangements, they were the handover arrangements, so that we had as smooth as possible facilitation of the one supplier leaving and one supplier taking over. We wanted that to go really well on day one, so that we could switch off one and turn on the other, and effectively the organisation should know very little about it on the surface level. And I think overall that was fundamentally what was achieved in the end.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Trotman?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question about cybersecurity. So I had an attempt to hack into my emails from Russia. Just my iPad had to get wiped. Just wondered if this is widespread, if we've noticed an increase recently in any sort of attempts to access emails or computer systems, and what actions we're taking to mitigate against these. Thank you.
So I haven't got the specific information for here, but I do know from other places that the sort of activity, the attempts are really, really going up in number, literally thousands per week. And the system arrangements so far have prevented that from actually crystallising, but it only takes one to get through to actually do some real damage. So I know the team are very much sort of vigilant in respect of those risks, and updating the sort of patches and the security controls that we've got in place to keep those as live as possible. As more intelligence is learned about the attempts that are being made, the responses sort of also gear up to meet those. But that risk is ever present and growing, so we just need to be really on top of that as an organisation. And I know the officers are aware of that, so they're doing their best to keep that going.
Yeah. Do you want to come back?
Thank you. Can I come back on that? Thank you for that explanation. So I just wondered if it might be prudent if we can send out a reminder to staff and councillors, because the attempt that I had was quite sophisticated, and it was the subject of the email and the person that had emailed me was it was someone that I'd already engaged in a dialogue with, one of my residents. So if I'd clicked on it to respond, it seemed legitimate. Obviously, once you get there and you realise that it's, oh, please click this link, etc. Obviously, something's up. But yeah, I just wondered if we can send out a reminder to councillors and staff just to kind of warn against that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That's an interesting observation, because actually staff do get quite regular reminders from some of the ICT staff to be on top of this stuff, and they do tests actually, sort of phishing exercises to try to catch staff out. I don't know if members are included on that, so that's a really good point that we should take back and make sure that they are part of that cohort of people that are being reminded on a regular basis. So yeah, that's a really good observation.
Councillor Thorne, you want to comment?
You've just answered one of my questions. I wonder if we did do phishing tests, and I was going to mention that I've never received one, so it was one of the elements. The other one is, do we do regular pen tests?
I believe so. I'll have to check that out with the IT team, but as part of feeding back about including the members on that group, I'll ask that question as well.
Councillor Blackwell?
Chairman, one of my bugbears is abbreviations. I hate them. And unfortunately, we may have new members sitting on audit next year and probably won't have a clue what ICT contract is. I definitely don't know what a RAG rating is. I haven't got a clue what a RAG rating is. But I think to help just normal members coming on that at the beginning of each agenda item, any abbreviations we could just have at the beginning of each agenda, so they can quickly flick and know what we're talking about. Because I've been at meetings where everybody's sitting there, nobody knows what until someone says, "What is that anyway?" and it's because it's officer talk. You guys use it every day of the week, and you know what you're talking about. A lot of councillors, and I never knew what a RAG rating was. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Go on. Yeah, please, Councillor Thorne.
With an apology, starters, in terms of that. And a lot of the terms that I would have used would have been IT terms, not things which are relating to the actual document. It's difficult. It is difficult because in a world of project management and IT, sometimes we could spend just as much time describing what the items actually mean as we do actually going through the items, which is why we have those abbreviations in the first place. But I sympathise and empathise with the situation. And I'm quite happy to go in and describe any of the terms that I've used or anyone else that I know at any point in time that somebody asks me.
Thank you. Yeah, cool. Okay.
Just for your information, Dave, just something simple like red, amber, green. It's simply just to say whether a project's in a good place or a bad place.
Thank you. Thanks for that report. And members, there's a recommendation with the Audit Committee notes progress made in delivering the 2021-22 internal audit strategy. Thank you. Moving on, we have the next item, which is item 9, is the internal audit charter strategy plan 2022-2023. Thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is our annual report to the committee on the approach to delivering the internal audit service for the council, and in doing so demonstrating how we comply with the public sector internal audit standards that we need to comply with. We set out the specific internal audit work that is proposed to be delivered during 22-23 and how this will provide assurance to the committee in respect of the council's corporate risks. I'm afraid there is quite a lot of material required by the standards, so as a result, in front of you, you have firstly a charter which explains what internal audit is and what that is for. This is Appendix 1 to the document. a strategy that explains how internal audit go about delivering this, which is Appendix 2. Then you've got our plan, which explains the specific audits that we propose to undertake during the year, which is Appendix 2A. And then a table showing how the planned work contributes to providing assurance over the Council's management of the corporate risks that Ben just took you through in one of the earlier items, and that's at Appendix B. Those appendices have all been reviewed and updated. They are broadly the same as we've done in previous years because nothing's really changed in respect of the requirements of us. But as it noted at paragraphs 4 and 5 of the covering report, we've explained where we have made changes to those documents. The key document for the committee really to consider is the plan, which is at Appendix 2A in the pack. This reports the audits that we consider will provide assurance in the most valuable areas for the council. We've discussed this with senior management and mapped this to the risks on the corporate risk register, as I said, at Appendix 2B. Hopefully the committee will agree that our proposed work is targeting the right risks and issues, but I'd be happy to receive any feedback or comments the committee have. That's all I really want to say, Chair, but again, happy to take any questions that the members may have.
Members, any questions? Yep. Okay.
I'm not sure if this actually comes into this section or with the previous section, but in conversations that we've had previously, it come to our attention that there is a senior officer flexible retirement scheme. I'm been made aware that it's not scrutinised by members, and I was told that there were irregularities with that scheme. And I just wondered if you could shed some light on that for me, please.
Thank you.
It's subject to an ongoing piece of internal audit work at the moment, so we can't really elicit any massive answers about that at the moment, but there will be a report forthcoming in due course once that report's been through due process, and that work's been completed and conclusions drawn.
Any idea when that report might come forward?
It'll come to the next meeting, the committee chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. There is again any further questions, members? There's a recommendation that the audit committee approves the charter, strategy, and the audit plan for 2022-2022. Is that agreed, members? Thank you. The next item is the Counter Fraud and Investigation Directorate. Thank you.
Mr. Butt.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, apologies to members. The report that should have been brought for you should have been sent to you earlier. It was a wrong report that was sent, so hence the late delivery of this report for you this evening, so apologies for that. So this report outlines the performance of the team over last year and also proposes a new counter-fraud strategy to tackle fraud for the council. Also, there will be, I'll be referring to Appendix A, which is the counter-fraud proactive work plan. This is the programme of proactive work proposed to ensure the council's posture against fraud is robust and effective, and I'll refer to that later on. Coming to investigations, the counter-fraud team has continued to undertake investigations of suspected fraud and other economic crime for the council. Since the pandemic, the counter-fraud team have found significant reductions in referrals to us and to our reporting portals, although every referral is assessing its own merits with action taken when required. So the following are statistics for the year 21 to 22. 40 new referrals were received by the counter-fraud team, and during that time 36 investigations were closed, and I should point out that that's not 36 out of the 40, because 36 investigations would include those from the previous year as well. And currently we have 20 active investigations that are currently being conducted. And the value of open investigations is currently £574,460. Throughout the year, 52 property visits were made by the counter-fraud team, 3 sanctions were issued, and 2 social housing properties were recovered. It's fair to say that the pandemic has changed the dynamic of work with the counter-fraud team, as well as everybody else. And we're now moving forward out of what we describe as the protect phase and into the moving forward. And it's hoped that referrals from not only the public but those within the council will also increase. So the contributions to the council's aims and priorities for this year, we've been working alongside the revenues departments to assist in the pre and post assurance checks on the grants that were administered by the council on behalf of the government, which related to the COVID-19 stimulus packages, and they would be the small business grants typically. We've formed part of the discussions with regards to post-assurance undertakings, working with the audit and revenues departments. This will continue as there is a new swathe of grants being administered for the government concerning COVID-19 business grants. These are similar in nature to previous, although there are now greater pre-assurance requirements placed on the local authority by the government. As a result of that, the counter-fraud team have developed an IP checking tool, IP being the Internet Protocol, which is a unique number linked to a network or a computer. So this would check if an IP address relating to an application coming into the council being used to gain a council benefit or a grant, it would check if that is situated within the UK or if it is a VPN or a proxy. And apologies, I'm not sure what the VPN stands for. I'm sure Councillor Thornton can assist me there. Thank you. Which I think it's fair to say these are things that are used to hide the true location of where an application is made from, which obviously could be from outside of the United Kingdom. And also we'll check if that IP address has been previously used in malicious or fraudulent activity. And this is a free tool available online and adds an extra dimension due to due diligence when deciding on the legitimacy of an applicant. The counter-fraud team are also working collaboratively with in a joint working group in partnership with the Castle Point Housing Management team and the Essex Police Safer Neighbourhood team. And recently in March, the counter-fraud team concentrated efforts within areas of Castle Point and saw them target Drapers Court on Canvey Island, where on a day of action, together with the counter-fraud team, the housing management team and the police, completed the full tenancy of the block. In total, 1 property is suspected of being in breach of tenancy. Another 2 tenants were issued with ABCs or acceptable behaviour contracts, and 24 full tenancy audits were completed, ensuring the council holds the full most relevant information for those tenants. I won't move on to the next couple of paragraphs, but to the proactive counter-fraud work plan. So this is other work that is ongoing, not just in response to referrals of fraud. That's in Appendix A. So the first one is the training in high-risk areas in counter-fraud measures, and again, this is in response to ongoing changes of staff within the council, and also to the reduction in the referrals that were received to the counter-fraud team. So it's counter-fraud training being delivered to members of staff here at the council to make them more aware of what to look for when dealing with the public and applications that might come into them, which would potentially raise red flags, and then those could then be referred on to the counter-fraud team. A review of all relevant policies has taken place, and that was being completed in Q2. And the next one is the COVID-19 Business Grants Counter-Fraud Programme. So the council was awarded, I believe, 19 million of government grants to businesses during the pandemic, and the team is using counter-fraud tools provided by the Cabinet Office and the commercial sector to assure the payment already made and prevent future frauds. So the counter-fraud team is utilising data sets with Spotlight and the NFI, which is the National Fraud Initiative, where different authorities and public bodies will hand through data sets to the Cabinet Office. These can be compared and, for example, could identify if there is someone applying for a council property in Castle Point who's already got a council property in a different area of the country. And if that is then raised, it's then referred to through the counter-fraud team. Again, we're renewing the education and marketing campaign for counter-fraud. This is in final stage of design, and we take it to senior management before posters and comms can be put out on the council's website and within these buildings to raise awareness of fraud and what to look for, and also how to report that to the counter-fraud team. And then finally, we have a criminal finances team who will target Proceeds of Crime Act and civil legislation to maximise the effects on criminal behaviour. So where, for example, we may have had a case of subletting of a council property within a local authority, not only do we take the the suspects for that through to a prosecution in the criminal court. Where they have benefited from the subletting of that property, we utilise the Proceeds of Crime Act to actually recoup money back into the government and also through to the local authority to get the money back from ill-gotten gains. So that concludes my update, Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Members, any questions at all? Councillor Blackwell?
Yeah, Chairman, I'd just like to say well done, because I think they do an excellent job. And I would emphasise the fact that I think we need to make sure that the public are aware what we are doing and what is actual fraud. And when you talk about the marketing campaign and you're talking about the website and in-house, can we not also put it around places like libraries, places like that? I think certainly. So that the public can actually be aware, because I'm not sure, and I would be interested to know how many sort of referrals come in from the public, or how would the public go about if they think, because probably over the years I've known cases where people have sublet their council house, gone back with mum and then subletted the council house to somebody else and made a few bob. So have we got if they phone, say for instance, the housing department, people are very worried, and I get this all the time, and I say, well, phone so-and-so, and they go, no, they might do 1471 and find out where I live. But we have a secure hotline they can phone.
Yeah, there's there is a number for the counter fraud team. I believe it's on the website that can be utilised, and it would be anonymous. Part of the training that we're doing with the staff also from the housing departments here is also so that when they receive those kind of calls, they know how to deal with it, and they know how to then make that referral to us.
Thank you, Chairman. And I think it's so important the public know that crime doesn't pay, and the council will take action to recover any debt which they've got through their criminal actions. And I think that needs to go out loud and clear to put people off. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you. Councillor May. Thank you, and I just want to say a big thank you for this. And this is just two. One's just telling you something. On the libraries now, they've got community walls where they're putting all community information, so that would be a good place to give out the information.
Thank you.
And the question I've got, is when we prosecute someone on a criminal case of fraud and that, do we actually get all their costs back, like the legal costs and the staff costs? Is that put into it as well? And do we get that claimed back?
Yes, it can be. It can be claimed back through costs on conviction, depending on what happens to them. But yeah, certainly for the costs of the investigation and the prosecution, those costs can be claimed back.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yeah.
Yes, a great report, and I'm glad that I've seen this particular document in respect to the investigations on part 3, but I'm a little bit confused, if I'm honest. When the People's Independent Party was set up 18 months or so ago, and 3 of us got elected this year, we set up a scrutiny committee. We did a lot of freedom of information checks, and we looked at things like Section 106. Now, I've been told in the past it's not under scrutiny, it might not come under audit, but it certainly comes under fraud when we find out that £1.4 million hasn't been paid for a development that was built 3 years ago. Now, I would have expected the value of the open investigations to be nearer £2 million on that, not £574,000. I just wondered where is that case being looked at? Because for me, that is fraud.
Okay, obviously I can't tell you here and now if that has been reported to us. If it hasn't been reported to us, it's not something that we can investigate. If you're aware that it has been, then I can look into that.
I'm shocked because we had a meeting with the interim CEO within weeks of us getting elected. We gave him a list of 7 things that we felt were not being dealt with adequately and hadn't been dealt with adequately. We were told that the fraud team Thurrock were looking into it, and in fact we were told that the police had been passed that information and they were taking legal action about it.
Okay, it may have been dealt with by the police, but if you can send me the details of the case, then I can have a look into that.
Let me give you a bit of an answer to that. I mean, I've been, as Chairman of Audit, I'm fully aware of the accusation that you're making against the Section 106 amount. It's outstanding, and I can tell you it's still completely tied up in law. We can't, although we're aware of it, there are still negotiations going on, and until those negotiations are finalised, possibly in court, I don't think it's a matter for officers. It will be remain with the legal team at Castle Point. But bear in mind also that, as I explained, if you're a local ward councillor, you will know about it, and as Chairman of Audit, I've been made fully aware of it. But that's as much as I can say, I'm afraid, because, as I say, the item is completely tied up in our legal team, and that's the way it is, I'm afraid. So I don't think it will actually apply to this particular counter or this audit section. It's fraud. But that's the only answer that I can give at the moment. Sorry, that's all we can say. But it will progress, I'm sure, as we move forward. Councillor Thornton, sorry.
Just on that point, I can understand that there is a contractual requirement to pay that, but you're running the risk of running a libelous act by saying that. And I'm no legal expert on this, but I'd be very concerned about saying something like that.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's as far as we need to discuss here. Members, we have a recommendation on this. Thank you very much for that report. The committee notes the performance of the counter fraud and investigation team over the last year. Thank you. I think that concludes the meeting, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along on the eve of this important election that's going to take place. Good luck to everybody that's involved. And I look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you. Thanks, officers. Thank you, Anne.